Okay, hello everybody. Welcome to the world's greatest Bronze Age Spider-Man podcast. Here comes the Spider-Cast. I'm your co-host, Mike Allen. As always, I'm joined by...
Joshua Mervell, and today we're going to be taking a look at Spidey comics from March of 1987.
That's right, and we are joined by Spidey expert Bex Luthor.
That's me, your friendly neighborhood Spidey expert. Nobody knows more about Spider-Man than I do, and nobody's more interested in the backstory and behind the scenes of Spider-Man than me.
Woo! That's right. That's why in 2 weeks we will be discussing how Tom DeFalco and Jim Shooter and Jim Owsley and Peter David all got fired from Spider-Man. Join us then. But until then, we're
not doing that this week because I didn't read it. But no,
that's okay.
We're just doing it next week because we want to.
Yes. But we still got more Spidey comics to review. So this is kind of a strange week, which we'll get into. But first, we're going to start off with Web of Spider-Man number 24.
Yeah, so this is kind of a weird fill-in episode, or issue. We start off in Atlantic City. Peter is tagging along with Aunt May and her group of friends from the Senior Citizens group as they go on like a gambling trip to a casino to try to like relax. Aunt May somehow convinced the group to allow her to bring Peter along with her. I don't know why, but I assume it's because the title is Web of Spider-Man and not Web of Aunt May. Mm-hmm. But he's along. That would be great. So he's along for the ride. We start off like right away where Nathan, Aunt May's ex, I guess at this point, right? Because I think they're broken up after that incident where he was like caught up in the gang drama. He's like emotional when like gambling all his money away. Aunt May is like worried, and all of her friends are trying to get her to like calm down and relax. That's not the point of the trip. It's to like just let everything go and have a great time. So we also kind of get this little snippet because it's a kid's comic book about gambling. We have to have a moment where Peter realizes that gambling is bad for you. So he only bets $1 because that's all he can afford, and he wins a bunch of money. And then immediately we see him gamble it all away, and he kind of catches himself and realizes, "Whoa, I can't bet anymore. I'll be in the negative. Gambling's bad." So after that, we cut over to this scene where like some of the executives and the owners of the casino are at the top floor. They're playing tennis in like an indoor tennis court, and the Vulture ends up swooping in, and he has a proposition for them where he has these like loaded like mechanical dice, like they're made from this special plastic that he can like control somehow. It doesn't really matter. They're like fake dice, and he wants to sell them to the casino for $1 million so that way they can control the hands of all of the the casino games and everything. They kind of refuse. They laugh him off. $1 million? Are you kidding me? Get out of here. So he flies away. Aunt May and Peter are out for like a walk, and Peter at this point is like still struggling with giving up on being Spider-Man. His powers are kind of lately have been like coming in and out, so he's trying not to. Oh my God! Sorry.
I should just point out while we're distracted. He's commenting on how he doesn't know if it's his powers that are affected or if it's someone specific, i.e., Future Venom, that is affecting his powers. Yeah,
and it is around the time where he wants to give it up as well. So he's like he's having self doubts, and he's thinking maybe that's why his powers are kind of like coming and going. Mm-hmm. So ultimately, we see him. He knows like something is going on. There's some commotion, but he tries to brush it off, but he can't once he sees that somebody has been like thrown off of the top floor of a building. So he runs in, webs them up, and as he is there, he thinks that somebody grabs his leg, and he's not too sure about it, but he realizes that his his powers kind of disappear for a second, and he's able to catch himself as he's falling down the building as well. Climbs into the window and then acts like nothing happened. He goes back to his apartment to get his camera, and he takes some pictures of Aunt May, and they kind of have like a nice little cute bonding moment. After that, we see... Oh my god, I'm sorry, my dog is going crazy. We see Adrian Toomes. Yeah. We see Adrian Toomes, aka the Vulture. He's kind of talking about how he's getting super old and he feels like he's close to death, and he's trying to kind of be remembered and kind of like figure out what he wants to do with the last moments of his life. He's kind of taken over a former like scientist and friend's lab equipment, and that's where he got the dice. So he doesn't have enough money to like sell like this technology to the government or anything. So he's kind of like, this is, you know, I've got to do something big so I'm remembered. We cut back to Spider-Man. They're and Aunt May. They're at like a magic show. And then Peter Parker's spider senses start going off, so he volunteers to go into the magic, to be a volunteer in the magic show, and he crawls away in like one of the disappearing boxes, and the magician is kind of like shocked as to how it even happened. Turns out Vulture's been like wreaking havoc and destroying all the machines after the managers refuse his offer of $1 million for the dice. They kind of have a big tussle going on, and it turns out that this casino is actually being run by some of the Rose's like goons. So Hobgoblin shows up. Hobgoblin and Vulture kind of have a little bit of a tussle, and then Vulture leaves. Hobgoblin is about to start fighting with Spider-Man when some of the people from the Roses like team kind of stop him and say, "Hey, listen, we need you to do something else right now. Forget about Spider-Man. We'll get him some other time." He goes over to see what's going on with the Rose. I don't even remember what the Rose has got going on, but he pretty much says, "We got something to do. Don't worry about it. We have plenty of time to kill Spider-Man." And that's pretty much where everything ends, I think. Peter and the gang head back to New York, and Peter kind of reflects on what's been going on with losing his powers and giving them up, and not really knowing what he should do at the end of the day.
So yeah, I should point out, I think I originally said this was a fill-in, but technically it's not. It's plotted by David Michelinie, who's the regular writer in Web, and it's scripted by Len Kaminski, who did last month's issue. Mm-hmm. However, it's drawn by Dell Barrass, who I've never heard of, ever. So it's sort of like one of those, it's not quite a fill-in, but it kind of is. The story is probably inconsequential, other than the fact that they tied in Hobgoblin and the Rose at the last minute, but it's probably one of those things where they could easily forget about this subplot and never go back to it and no one would notice.
Yeah, like I don't think anything really happens in this issue that changes anything, but just having the Hobgoblin and the Rose show up at the end kind of like places this comic in a time period. I think that's really all it does. Right. So it's almost like it's technically not a fill-in because look at this. This is what's going on right now. So yeah, I'll just say this issue feels a little bit like a fill-in. Vince Colletta is kind of known as like a rush job inker, even though I do like him. And the issue does have a kind of a cheap fill-in feel to it, but at the same time, I like the fact that it's done in one. It has that kind of 80s crappy fill-in charm, and it's got that ugly flexographic process in the coloring where all the colors are blinding, neon bright. And so for that reason, even though it's not a great story, I kind of enjoyed it. Bex Luthor, what do you think?
I thought it was funny. I don't think it was intended to be. I love the idea of Aunt May not having any money and everyone's broke, but let's go on his trip across the U.S. to a casino. All right, sure. Like, that's not an expensive holiday. I love that the Vulture's back. And he just is sad. And I like that that's his character in this comic. He's just sad and a coward. Oh, he's like, whoa, hobgoblin. And just like eats out of there. Mm-hmm. I love Peter's outfit. 10 out of 10 on the outfit.
Oh my god.
Like a stark white suit. Black shirt, brown shoes. Peter. Come on. So we were almost there. I like just the silliness of it all. I like Hobgoblin being like, oh, I'll get to kill Spider-Man. And then his boyfriend's like, we'll do it next time. He's like, okay, we'll do it next time. Like, I like, like, I'm fully committed to the bit that Hobgoblin and the Rose are dating. And if you read these comics with that in mind, it's so much more enjoyable. Like, their banter is so much funnier to think, like, they have this, this business relationship, and then they just go home, and they, like, just, like, are sitting in bed and have a good night. Oh my god, love it. Yeah, at least Peter and Aunt May got to spend some time together. I know he had to go be Spider-Man a couple times, but you know, she seems to be dealing with some stuff, and Peter is like very selfish and is like, I'm dealing with some stuff. But Aunt May's like, her boyfriend isn't the man she thought he was. She doesn't have enough money for her home. Her son is a dick. Like, she's dealing with it. And she has such little friends that she has to bring her nephew to her vacation in Atlantic City with her, like, Aunt May. Well,
I mean, technically she is an aunt, but I think Peter Parker's always been a mama's boy, right? That's okay. But Joshua...
Normally mama's boys are, you know, a little nicer to their...
Yeah.
Well, we didn't say he was nice. Anyway, Joshua Mervell, what do you think?
You know, I will say, though, Peter in this issue is actually super sweet. Like, this is the Peter that I recognize. Right. I don't think at any point he was, like, a dick to anybody in this. I love that he uses the excuse that he has to go to the bathroom to... save that guy after he's like falling off the building, and then before going back, instead of like just running back down to see Aunt May, he runs up and gets his camera and he comes back down and he like takes pictures of her. Like there's like these like nice genuine moments with each other. It's great. I really love the Vulture. I love how goofy this goon is. Yeah. Hobgoblin showing up is just like super weird. And really does feel like they're like trying to tie this into the current stuff, and it doesn't really feel like they need to do this. Like they could have just had them be. They could have even had like the Rose show up. Like Vulture could have like wreaked havoc, and then he goes up to the suites to like, you know, rough up the head honchos, and then the Rose walks in. He's like, hey, listen, you're in the wrong neighborhood, get out, kind of thing. Because he's more of that like calm, subdued bad guy. Vulture could be like, okay, listen, I don't want to get involved in any gang wars, I'm out of here. But Hobgoblin just feels like, ooh, wouldn't it be really fun if Hobgoblin was flying around here too? And then we can have some unnamed dude just be like, listen, Hobby, I don't know. This doesn't seem like a good idea. Maybe we'll fight Spider-Man later. And he just agrees like, you know what? You're right. It's just, yeah, it's a little strange, but all in all, I had fun with it. The art is like pretty fun, but extremely inconsistent throughout, particularly with like the backgrounds. Right. A lot of the times I'm not following where they are. Like things are changing so much in the background. And on top of that too, I know it's something so small and it feels very nitpicky, but the scale and look of all of the slot machines behind them changes so much from panel to panel. It's insane. I don't have the page number, but it's after Vulture comes flying into the casino. Peter Parker finally gets away from the magician, and he's swinging as Spider-Man. The bottom of the page, this slot machine is like 3 stories tall. It's gigantic.
They say why. There's one giant novelty slot machine in the casino.
But the thing is too, like the lever is like way up in the air. Like this guy would have to jump 5 feet in the air to pull this thing down, and then the next one, it's like right next to him at like arm's reach, and he just like cha-ching. Like
I see what you mean.
Yeah, everything is just so scaled differently. Even earlier on too, when like Peter is gambling, all the slot machines are like sitting on top of tables, and he's looking at a red one like, ooh, I think I'll use this one. And then the next panel, it's like another giant tall slot machine that goes all the way to the floor. Like, it's just weirdly inconsistent for it being like
a professional comic book
panel to panel, right? Like,
right.
I don't know. I'm not going to nitpick it too much, but it just was something that for some reason kept popping up, and it was a little distracting.
Yeah.
Well, even sorry.
Go ahead, Becca.
I was gonna say, even like if you look at the panel where Nathan is at the table in his wheelchair, it looks like he's not, like, it's not perspectively correct. His chair is just like, that's not where the wheels would be.
No, you're right. The wheels, like his chair is at a angle, and the wheels look like someone just cut and pasted out two wheels and pasted them onto the page.
Circles, yeah.
Yeah, you're right.
But like they wouldn't be like, they'd be facing the way that Nathan is facing.
Exactly.
They would be this way, like.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, this is probably. Well, go ahead.
I was just saying, there's a couple things like that stuck out to me. Like when Peter's like, oh, there's a scuffle on the street, and there's just a single chair falling out the window, coming down the panel, like a very small chair.
That scene is the weirdest in the whole book. I did not quite know what was going on there.
I was like, is that someone falling out a window, or is that a chair
And
floating
like, what
from
is
heaven?
this place too? Like, is it all under construction at the casino? I'm confused. Like, it kind of looks like they're walking in scaffolding along a dock. Like, I just didn't understand where they even were.
Right. Well, I here's the thing. Okay, so I just looked up Dell Barrass, and I've never heard of this person before, but I just found out they're from the Philippines. Now, what I will say is that Marvel and DC had this weird trend in the late 70s of they would recruit these Philippines artists for like dirt cheap, and sometimes these artists were better than almost anyone working at Marvel or DC, right? Now, this guy is not great, but he's pretty good, but it could just be a case that maybe he's a good artist, but he doesn't have experience with panel-to-panel art or the standard Marvel style. Maybe that's it. I don't know.
Yeah, because I don't think there was really any point where the character stood out to being like not drawn correctly or in weird positions. Like, it was all really solid. I think it was just in the layout and storytelling of it all where it kind of got a little bit muddy and confusing. But the style, I think, really fits this kind of like cartoonish-y, like goofy story. Like,
I mean, we've talked about this so many times, and I hate to reiterate it, but I've given modern Spidey comics a chance so many times because let's just say John Romita Jr. is drawing an issue, and I'll pick it up and I'll read it, and it's always part 15 of a 26-part story, and I'm like, you know what? I just don't even want to bother, but at least with this story, you can pick it up and leave the whole thing, right? There's something to be said about that, I think. I don't know. Like I said, it's not great, but I find it charming, you know?
Yeah.
So
one of the big problems I have with this is it takes something that I genuinely normally like, which is like the solid color background thing. And instead, for some strange reason, it's just piss yellow and vomit green. And those are the only two colors that the backgrounds can be. I was like,
yeah.
Why not just, you're outside, make it blue? Why is everything yellow? Why is everything yellow?
Yeah, good point.
And it's a bad yellow.
Well, and here's the thing. In the blog that we're going to review in 2 weeks, one of the things that Jim Owsley talks about is that in the however many years he was editor, 3 or 4, he never missed a deadline. So if a comic was late, he would, stay late, work weekends, call up all his buddies, and they would get that issue out in time. So this is probably a case where somebody was late, so they were like, okay, let's get this guy no one's heard of to draw the issue. Let's get, whoever to color it. And so they're probably staying up late on Saturday and Sunday to get this thing out, and that's probably why, like you said, all the backgrounds are piss yellow.
Well, my counterpoint to that is there's at one point when they're in the casino fighting, all of the ceilings and walls are piss yellow, but the carpet is a lovely sky blue. So I know you have a sky blue. Just swap them.
Yeah.
Make all the background sky blue.
Good point.
Yeah.
Instead of ugly, awful yellow, because it makes me not want to read it, because I'm like, wow, gross. Just the worst yellow.
Well, you'll be happy to know that the blog we're reviewing in 2 weeks, the entire background's piss yellow. So anyway, so you'll be glad to read it. Okay, so now let's...
Maybe that's why I couldn't get through it. I was just like, what does this remind me of? All right, piss.
Okay. So anyway, I'll just say that, again, if you had to skip an issue of Web of Spider-Man, you could skip all of them. But if you had to only pick one, this would be the one to skip because it's not really important. However, if you're looking for a charming, 80s Spidey crossover comic, not even a crossover, just a fun comic, I think it's okay. And so on that basis, I give it a mild recommendation. Joshua Mervell, what do you think?
Yeah, it's a pretty goofy one. It feels even retro from being in the 80s. Like it feels even, it feels like it doesn't even belong in this era. But I did have fun reading this one. I will say it's also an easy read. Like I blasted through this one. This one was super quick. Maybe it was also just because it was fun and goofy, but yeah, again, it's a mild recommendation. It's not something I'm going to be like, raving about, but it's a pretty solid, fun story.
Mm-hmm. Bex Luthor?
I'm going to give it a recommendation. There are definitely worse web of comics that we've read already than this. If you're going to skip one, this is also maybe not the worst one with Vulture in it, honestly. I like the little take into Vulture's, like, he's getting old and he's upset and he's sad. I like that characterization. I also really like at the end, I forgot to mention, where the Hobgoblin is like talking with the Rose and he's constantly on the Goblin Glider. Like just they're all just walking and he's just on the Goblin Glider as they walk. Like he doesn't get off of it. It just seems so funny to me. No, it's so camp. I like it. Read it. It's funny. It's interesting. And, the sky is yellow.
There you go. Piss yellow, to be specific. Okay, so that wraps up our review of Web number 24. Now we're going to move to The Amazing Spider-Man number 286, Gang War Part 3, Thy Father's Son. And Becca, you're going to tell us what this one's about.
I am, as long as these ads can go away. Less yellow, I think, in this one. All right, it's been like a couple weeks since I read the last one, so I totally forgot that the Punisher was even... It showed up last time. So we start off with Peter having recovered from the Punisher's like gas grenade that like knocked him out. And of course, as he's recovering, the cops show up. And then what happens immediately after that? Oh yeah, the Rose is in a meeting, right? And so like all of these bad guys are in a meeting, and that's what Peter was trying to stop, was Frank Castle exploding their like meeting with a bazooka, right? So you've got the Rose and his goons, and and Hobgoblin's there, and Peter's all super groggy, and he does a sick front flip over a helicopter to get out of there because he doesn't really know what's going on, and he ends up sleeping in the garbage for a night. Yeah, he falls asleep. He passes out in some garbage bags, which, same. Can relate. And in the morning, we see that Lance Bannon is at the police precinct, and he's looking to get some leads from just the hippiest cop there is. Is this a character that I should know, by the way?
Not that I recognize.
Okay, cool.
I don't think so,
like,
no.
Who the hell is this guy? But anyway, Lance Bannon goes with this cop to get some information. And then we quickly pan back over to who I now know is the Rose, but was very confused when I was reading. Like, who's this who's this blonde boy? Oh, why do I care? Who's this guy? And who's this girl that he's flirting with? Like, who cares? But it's the Rose and his girlfriend, who I also... Am I supposed to know who she is?
No.
Cool. Didn't.
Yeah.
I was like, who's this babe? But they have a little bit of witty flirting, banter. And then we pan back to Peter, who is less successful in his life. He's waking up from sleeping in the garbage bags with a homeless man draped on him. And he goes to try to get a taxi, realizes, oh, I'm Spider-Man. Probably can't hail a taxi. So he takes the bus home.
Love it.
Which is actually, yeah, it's great. He takes the bus home, and it turns out Mary Jane had been at his apartment all night waiting for him, as you do. And he goes in the shower, and Mary Jane takes a look at his butt. You know, they're having some cute times. We go back over to the cop and Lance Bannon, and they are talking with, looks like an informant of some sorts. And he's saying, like, there's going to be a big throwdown at the docks tonight, or what? There always is a big throwdown at the docks, and it's always tonight. So, and then Lance Bannon is very upset that it's tonight, because he has plans. He can't take really good pictures of newsworthy events when he has plans. So, we go back over to the Rose, who's in his apartment. His girlfriend's taking a shower. She's like, so you're the Rose? And he's like, yeah, isn't that sick? And she's like, I guess. He's like, but I've never actually committed any crimes. I just have told other people to do that. And I was like, that's still a crime. But just because you've never pulled the trigger doesn't mean you haven't killed anybody. But okay, go off the Rose with on your morality, I guess. And she's just like, well, this apartment is really nice, so I guess I don't care. Sick character. We go back over to Peter Parker's apartment. Peter's taking a nap on Mary Jane's lap and decides, and then Lance Bannon shows up to his apartment and is like, hey, I have stuff I have to do, which isn't suspicious at all. Can Peter take pictures of this gang war that's happening at the docks tonight? And Mary Jane's like, don't worry, I'll tell him for sure. Closes the door, absolutely does not tell him. Meanwhile, while she's at the door talking to Lance Bannon, Daredevil calls Peter Parker on the phone.
As one does.
Like, hey, yo, Pete, it's me, Daredevil. Can you meet me on the rooftop at midnight? And Peter says nothing and just hangs up. So, you know, cool. And then Mary Jane comes back to the couch, and she was like, oh, who's that? And he was like, no, nothing. And he was like, who's at the door? And she's like, oh, no one. And then they just both believe each other. And Peter goes back to taking his nap on Mary Jane's lap, which is the correct choice, I should say, of all the things that you could be doing. So then we go back to the Rose, who is Wilson Fisk's son. It's Richard Fisk. And he's visiting Vanessa, his mother, in the hospital, and she recognizes him. And he's like, holy crap, like, I didn't know that was possible. And one of Kingpin's men, I don't think it's the Arranger, I think it's somebody that works for the Arranger, is like, oh yeah, sometimes she has bouts where she knows what's going on. She actually responds really well to therapy during these times, so can you get out so we can do that? And he's like, no problem, doc, totally sounds legit. And then when he leaves, the doctor's like, well, you know what I told you, Vanessa, you gotta stay in a coma or else. So that's also suspicious. We go back over to what Peter's doing, and he left Mary Jane in his apartment to go talk to Aunt May, which I guess is fine, but also, like, dude, Mary Jane's in your apartment. So he goes, and he has tea on Aunt May's porch, and that's nice for him, I guess. We go back over to now that the gang war is happening. Again, it's been happening, but now it's at the docks or wherever, and it's raining for a dramatic effect. And this hippie cop is, like, creating, like, a sting operation or whatever. And in pops Hobgoblin and Jack-o'-lantern. And they crash through, it looks like, the ceiling to tell everyone that they better behave or they're going to do something, as if they already didn't crash into the ceiling. So we back over to Peter Parker. He's at the location where Daredevil told him to meet him. He's thinking about Daredevil. Daredevil does not show up. Meanwhile, Dina, I think is her name, the Rose's girlfriend, is like, oh, what's going on? And he's like, I got Rose shit to do. So, and he's like, you'll be here when I get back, right? And she's like, I don't know. Solid relationship dynamic, these two. Really interesting, and I'm glad I know all about it. So we go back to this gang war that's been happening. And the cops are gonna start, like, they need reason to shoot at people, and these people are gonna start shooting at the cops. There's a big explosion, and then a bunch of buildings catch on fire in the rain, as they do. So Peter calls his apartment, which he knows Mary Jane's at, and is like, hey, did anyone named Matt call? And she was like, no, but Lance Bannon stopped by and said that there was this big thing that was going to happen, and I didn't tell you because I didn't want you to go, but I'm telling you now. So he obviously goes. He tries to get a ride with the cops at first, and the cops are like, no, I don't trust you, Spider-Man. And then they're like, oh, maybe we do trust you, Spider-Man. Come on, we'll take you down to the docks. Where all of the goons that Peter shows up riding the top of a cop car, pretty sick, blaring its sirens, and Jack-o'-lantern and Hobgoblin are like, oh, Spider-Man. Well, actually, Hobgoblin's like, oh, Spider-Man. Jack-o'-lantern's like, whoa, Spider-Man. That guy's a lot. Like, why is he scared of Spider-Man? So,
actually, he got beat up by him, remember, Josh, in that one issue?
Yeah, and ever since then, that's also why he was in that, like, shitty Sinister Six team. Because he's like, I can't fight Spider-Man by myself, and I know that. So
but he's not alone.
Yeah. He was still one extra person? Nah, I don't think so.
Yeah, so basically Jack-o'-lantern yeets out of there, like, right away. And then Peter and the Hobgoblin are fighting, and it's actually kind of cool. And then the Rose is trying to get out of, like, where all the cops are. He runs into a young traffic cop who is responding to the call. And he has this dilemma. He's like, well, this guy either shoots me and ruins my lifelong plan of bringing my father down, or I kill him. Those are the only two available options to me. The Rose, better kill him. So he shoots the cop, as one does. Meanwhile, Spider-Man has given up his fight with the Hobgoblin to start saving people in the burning building. And, like, helping the firemen put out the fire and save a bunch of people. Which is great, because, you know, forget the Hobgoblin. Save the children, whatever. And then the issue ends with Peter going back to his apartment with Mary Jane, and she's like, oh my god, Peter, you saved so many lives. That was amazing. And then the news is like, except for one guy didn't get saved. And the Rose's girlfriend is like, oh, he shot a guy. And he comes back to his apartment and now has to explain himself. So that's the issue.
Mm-hmm. So
who the hell's Dina?
Well, I'll just say quickly, as with Jim Owsley's previous kind of fill-in issues, this one's a little bit all over the place, but I think this whole sequence at the end with that cop is really well done, personally. So I think that elevates this issue a little bit. So kind of a slightly above average issue of Amazing, which we can get into more in a minute. But Josh, what do you think of this one?
Yeah, I kind of liked it. I think that humanizing the Rose a little bit and giving him some depth, like this is the most I've actually cared about the Rose as a person, rather than just like this figure behind a mask. He's always been super fun and kind of intriguing to figure out what's going on with him, but like taking off that mask and like having the moment with his mom and then finding this woman is really cool.
Right.
And like their kind of relationship growing is nice. I feel like it's super rushed. I think that I would have liked to maybe see them actually like develop a relationship rather than like a quick conversation in the park and then all of a sudden they're sleeping together and she's living in his apartment.
Right.
Like, because it seems like it's the same day. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know if this is supposed to be like this thing that's been happening for a while and like the park thing was like a little bit of a flashback or what, but it really feels like he met this woman in the park and then took her home the same night and she's just been staying at his place for some reason. But I do like their dynamic together, giving him like this thing where he's never killed anybody and he's got to kind of like test his morals, like how far is he willing to go to see his plan through. Pretty interesting. I like Peter and MJ's relationship here too. Like Peter is trying to protect protect MJ and like kind of give up the Spider-Man thing. So he's like, forget it. I'm not meeting Matt. And then she's protecting him. Like, he's so tired. He's like worn out. He's not feeling well at all. I'm not going to tell him about this thing. Some other hero can deal with this. So it's kind of like a fun dynamic. They're kind of on that same level. And then at the same time, they kind of both realize that maybe they've messed up and they should have kind of like done what they were supposed to do. It's that kind of like, with great power comes great responsibility, without having to shove down your throat. With great power comes great responsibility.
And repeat it every issue, right? Exactly.
So it's kind of like a nice familiar theme that feels maybe a little bit fresh because you don't have to say it. And then the ending with I actually really like that. There's a moment where Peter is so angry and fed up that he like just before a fight even happens, he just like runs up to Hobgoblin and like pulls him off his glider and slams him on the ground, like punches him and says, listen, I don't have time to fight you. There's people that are dying. So if you want to kill somebody, find somebody else to kill, and swings away. And Hobgoblin is kind of like taken aback for a second and then just flies off. I thought that was a pretty cool moment where you can have a little bit of a fight, like that obligatory, well, it's a comic book, you gotta have a fight, you know what I mean? But it like, I don't know, it just feels like it adds to Peter's determination to go save these people rather than stick around and have another like fight that goes nowhere. So yeah, I actually surprisingly really enjoyed this one. I right from the start, I thought I was going to, I thought it was going to be a rough time with Peter sleeping in the trash and this cop that I've never heard of doing his thing, but it ended up being a pretty all around good read.
Bex Luthor, what do you think?
This was my favorite issue this week. I was actually like super pulled in by it. I love Peter waking up in the garbage. I love him taking the bus home. Right. I love the issue starting out with him waking up in the garbage and having to take the bus home, and ending with him saving people's lives out of a burning building. Like that's Peter Parker all wrapped up nice one issue. Is this boy. Doesn't matter how down on his luck is, he still does the right thing. He's still a good boy. And I really, really appreciate that, especially when you have the juxtaposition of those last couple pages where Peter is saving people out of the burning building and the Rose is killing an innocent man. Like, you have... And they both think that they're doing the right thing, and one is clearly the right thing, and one is clearly not. Right? No matter how much you can justify it, killing an innocent man is murder, and that's right.
Yes.
Even if it's for the greater good, whatever your plan is, you're still killing somebody. Whereas Peter is like actively choosing to disregard the costumed weirdos and to save people. So I thought that was really interesting, and like this backstory of the Rose, I thought it worked really well, especially with the ending. It's like, no matter how much he can justify it to himself, he's still not a good guy. And I think, like, this girl, whoever she is, I don't know if she stays or not. Her Marvel wiki page was not very long.
Oh,
so I'm going to go with
Dina?
probably not. Yeah.
She only made 5 appearances. I looked it up, yeah.
Okay, so either she dies or gets broken up with. And never shows up again. But this relationship where she's, like, knows about him being the Rose, and if she does end up staying with him, regardless of what he did, it seems very like the Vanessa and Wilson Fisk relationship, right? And especially from the Daredevil, like the TV show.
Yes.
Where she knows that he's this bad guy, and she stays with him, and it's like an interesting dynamic. And I'm like, oh, maybe you're not so much like you're literally your father's son, regardless of what you think you're doing. So yeah, no, really enjoyed this issue a lot. I love the art. Love the art.
Really? Okay.
Yes. The backflipping, the first splash page where it's like the silhouette of Peter on the like, and it's like a cutout of him is great.
Mm-hmm.
And then he backflips over the helicopter. That's rad.
Right.
And all of the artwork in the rain, the fighting in the rain, like
it's
the hobgoblins.
So good.
It's so good. It creates, it's, even with like the recoloring that we're reading, it creates such an atmosphere. Peter climbing up that building, fire in the background, rain in the foreground, Peter climbing up that building to save people from a fire.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I'm talking about when I want a panel that like hits me right in the Spider-Man feels like that.
Right.
The cutting
right
back and
sense.
forth too is like very cinematic, and it like builds on the intensity of what's happening. Like we see Rose pull the gun out, and then we cut back to Spider-Man. He's climbing up the building with the fire hose wrapped around him, and then it cuts back to the Rose, and then it's just like it feels so fast paced, and it really adds to that like build up of Rose finally killing him.
Right.
No, it's just the writing and the art like mesh perfectly in this issue. This is maybe it's not the best comic book in the world, but this is it executed extremely well for what it is.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I'm done. You're good.
No. Go ahead.
I was just gonna keep rambling.
Oh, ramble on.
No, go.
Well, no, I was just gonna say that. I don't know. I guess it just goes to show, because I wasn't as impressed with it, but it's just so cool that, again, this is not a fill-in, but it's sort of in between creative teams, that even in an issue like this that's maybe a little bit rushed, there's still something to be said for, the creativity that goes into it and stuff. There's always something good to find in these issues, and that's what I love, And I actually noticed, you were commenting on specific things, but did you guys notice how much this artist used the classic 9-panel grid?
Mm-hmm.
A lot.
Like, if you go to page digital 19, digital 20, digital 21, and that's it, I think. But 4 pages in a row, it's all 9-panel. And that's like the classic Steve Ditko, format from like the 60s. And I just love the fact that they stuck to it like that. It's just really cool. It forces you to get creative with your storytelling,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for me, it's like whenever there's those 9 panels, like it goes from like wider, bigger panels to those small ones. I'm like, it's fast paced. It's like making you like the smaller panels. It's creating a pace in your reading.
Good point. Yeah.
Which only comic books can do that, right? Like with panel work.
You're right.
I think panel work is an art in itself, right? Like sometimes. Like when you have these splash pages and long panels, it adds something to the artwork and to your eyes following the bubbles and things like that. Like if paneling is bad, it makes it so the comic is hard to read and lessens your enjoyment. Whereas when it's good, like this, it adds to it. It's like adding to your pacing and the drama of it all.
Yes, I agree. I mean, again, this is not, quite high art, but at the same time, they're using the form exactly how it should be used. Like you said, they're telling a story. It's a fast-paced story. It's good stuff. It's a classic. It's got a classic feel to it. So, yeah, I did really enjoy this issue, even though I thought that the last part, like the last sort of third, was better than the first part. Overall, I really enjoyed this issue, for sure.
Yeah, I also really like, because this is also the first time we have confirmation that Fisk is
the Rose, right? I wasn't sure about that, if this was the first official time, but yeah, you're right, it is.
I believe so. And this reveal is so good and so subtle. It feels like how they would have done it on like the Daredevil Netflix show.
Right.
It's so great. He doesn't, he doesn't like turn around in his chair and go, "I am the Rose."
Right.
Like it's just this like quiet, subtle thing where, his girlfriend is like asking him like what he does. Like, listen, yeah, my dad's rich. You're right. But I'm doing this, I'm doing all of this because he's a bad person. So I'm infiltrating and trying to do this. Like, well, like, doesn't that make you a bad person too? Like, no, I'm not about, it's just like this build up and like the tension between the two. Like we kind of see at the start that he's really not interested in her and kind of has like some tension there with her to begin with. And then when we cut back to this, it like, he's not really paying attention to her again, like kind of brushing her off. He's reading his Time magazine. And then he says, she asks, have you ever had anyone killed? And then he smiles and said, no one who didn't deserve it.
Yes.
Only criminals. It's their way of life. And then we see her looking in the, like, as he's like in the background continuing to read, as she's seeing like the mannequin with the mask over it. And then he gets the call again that, you know, some sort of business thing. She kind of like covers herself up a little bit, and like you can kind of see in her body language just in that one panel that she's kind of like unnerved by how he can kind of just brush it off, even though that they're criminals. Like he's had them killed. And then we cut away. There's never a moment where it's like that like big reveal. It's great.
I gotta point out something. I think I'm so used to superhero comics being over the top and hitting you over the head that it's like you said, this is how they would do it in the like a Netflix TV show, just subtly revealing it. But because this is an 80s comic book, I was almost like, wait a minute, where is the big splash page with all the lines coming out from behind his head, right? It's like, no, it's just the one little panel showing the Rose's mask. And I actually had to like go on MarvelFandom.com to see if this was, I'm like, is this the first time it's official? And they don't even say it is. But yeah, you're right, it is. But it's just so subtle that it almost passes you by. But
I also would have expected something on the cover to like, finally, the identity of the Rose has been revealed. It's like nothing. It's just like part of the story. It's I really love that moment.
Yeah.
I don't think, like, I can't remember a time in like in anything that we've read in Spider-Man so far where like a reveal has happened like this.
Right.
Like this feels so fresh and new, and a fantastic way to do this. Like, especially since it's like a serious tone, this whole comic, there's not really many jokes. There's a lot, it's kind of fast paced, but like a lot of like deeper, intense things are happening. So the way that they revealed this, I think, is like perfect. They, you know, it couldn't have been done better any other way.
And I also have to say, okay, I love Spider-Man. Everybody knows that. There's a huge gap in my Spider-Man reading. Like, I've read every 80s Spidey, and I've read, I think, Amazing Spider-Man 1 to 50. But I have a huge gap of, like, you know, all, like, around Amazing 50 to about Amazing 200. I've only read scattered issues. So I learned something today that I didn't know. Did you guys know that the Rose, while the Rose first appeared in Amazing 253 or so, did you know Richard Fisk has been around since Amazing number 83 in April 1970?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I
had no idea.
I had no idea.
Was he a kid then?
No, I don't know because I haven't read the issue, but I don't think so. No, I think he was an adult.
Oh, okay. Because I, for some reason, kind of remember him having a kid. So, yeah, maybe I'm mistaken. Maybe I'm confusing it with,
because
like,
it says here in his first story he wanted to dethrone the Kingpin. So he was already an adult.
Okay. Yeah,
it's just interesting. I just didn't realize that. It just shows, like, the gap in my Spidey knowledge, you know?
Interesting.
Yeah. So we've pretty much talked about everything with this issue, I think. I mean, we all enjoyed it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we keep saying, we're like, we don't think it's a masterpiece, and then we keep saying things that are great and we love about it. So maybe it is one of those just hidden gems of a comic where it's like, this is one of those comics where you're like, I know it's the middle of like a gang war, but if you want to see what the medium can do, read this one. Like,
yes.
I think if this was someone's first Spidey issue, they'd be like, oh, sick. Like, Spider-Man, garbage. Spider-Man, bus. Spider-Man, hero. Spider-Man, tired. Like, it gets all your Peter Parkers. It's got some villain backstory. It's got some great art.
He visits Aunt May. We get the great power, great responsibility thing without it having to be this, you know, main focus. I really enjoyed this issue.
I think that, yeah, you're right. I think the point is that sometimes you'll have an issue or anything. It could be a movie, it could be a TV show that doesn't stand out on its own. But the more you think about it, it's like, well, maybe this particular plot is not a standout plot, but it's like everything's executed perfectly, so that makes it a great comic, you know? So yeah, you're right, it is kind of like a hidden gem, I guess. So yeah, I'll definitely recommend this issue. Joshua Marvell, what about you?
For sure. Yeah, this is a definite read for any Spider-Man fan. If you're reading this arc, there's a lot that you can skip. This is definitely a must read. Down to the like revelation of the Rose, the kind of like Peter and MJ's relationship is kind of coming to a head where they're getting back together. I think it's pretty soon that they, spoiler alert, get married, right?
I don't want to spoil it, but it's coming up.
Of them getting together.
Yeah, right? So like
it happens very fast. They're just like, you know what? We should be married.
Yeah.
And so I'm just like, whoa.
And this is also like, they're not in a relationship right now, but it's also his best relationship he's had the whole time we've read Spider-Man throughout the 80s.
Right.
They're kind of actually working together like Black Cat and Spider-Man should have been working together, where they're MJ is like sticking around, making sure he's okay. They're kind of protecting each other. She's calling to update about what's going on in the news. Like, it feels like a team, even though she's not a superhero. They're working together. So yeah, this is fantastic. I would definitely recommend this one.
And Bex Luthor, you recommend it?
Yeah, absolutely. No, for sure. And I think a big part of that is because Mary Jane is like written like a real person, like she's way more fleshed out in the last couple weeks that we've been reading than Black Cat I think ever was in their relationship. Like she's like, oh, I'm not totally okay with him being Spider-Man, but I like she has some sort of like, her character isn't just I'm in love with Spider-Man, which I think is a big plus. And it's interesting that we get so much of that in this issue of like Peter is down on his luck, but then he isn't alone. A lot of Spider-Man is mopey, oh woe is me, and in this issue he has Mary Jane and Aunt May on his side, rooting for him, and he does become the hero at the end. And this is one of those issues where he ends it out like, I know a man died, but I feel like Peter actually like finishes on top.
Yeah.
Right? He's got his two best girls in his corner. He saved all those people from the fire. Like, what more do you want, right? No, definitely, I would definitely recommend this one. You don't even need to know that the Punisher was here before. In fact, I would skip the previous issue and just do this one. Who cares how Spider-Man ended up on that roof, but he's there now. Okay,
there you go. Okay, so with that, we are going to go to Peter Parker, the Spectacular Spider-Man, number 124. One of the things about Jim Owsley is he, as editor of Spider-Man, he was very proud of the fact that there was never a late issue of Spider-Man during his entire tenure as editor. Now, one of the reasons he was able to, do that is because whenever there were maybe the writer or artist was late, they would just get a fill-in issue that they kind of had in the drawer, and they would, put it out as if it was a new story. So if you go on MarvelFandom.com, you find out that this particular story was meant to take place, of course I clicked away, but it was during Spectacular Spider-Man number, I think 73 and 74, which...
Yeah, something like that.
Which would have been like...
72 and 73.
Okay, 72 and 73.
Something like 60 months ago.
Yeah, well, more than that. This is going back all the way to 1982, and we're in 1987, so that's 5 years earlier. So that's a huge gap. But you know what? It's okay, because it's all good fun in the 80s, nothing matters, right? So we got a script by Roger McKenzie, who I mostly know from Captain America, art by Greg LaRoque, who was doing... I think he was on Spectacular at that time, or Marvel Team Up, or one of them. And as of this issue, as of like a few months ago, Dr. Octopus, as Josh pointed out, is technically dead, right?
Yeah, or missing. Like something happened with him and the Owl when they were kind of having the war. Right. He disappeared. I think that we're led to believe that he has been foiled for the last time and he's gone.
Right. So in this issue, Doc Ock is A-OK. And you guys are going to have to help me with the particulars, but basically Doc Ock is attacking this truck, and we're not sure why yet, but he kind of lets it be known that he's after something that this truck is transporting.
Plutonium.
Right.
Yeah. It's just a truck full of plutonium traveling across
classic superhero story.
A civilian bridge.
Yeah, so that's the MacGuffin of the story, that Dr. Octopus is after this plutonium because it can help him power his arms, right? I think.
Yeah, he wants to be strong.
Right.
Yeah.
Just, traditional crap.
Right. So he basically attacks this truck and he steals this, like, what are those things called? It's like a big
canister
of plutonium or whatever it is. Right. So he gets away. We cut over to Peter Parker, who's kind of half in costume, sitting in his bathrobe watching TV, and then he sees on the news what's happening with Doc Ock. And then he's talking about how he's like, oh no. He's like, Dr. Octopus, blah, blah, blah. He's like, last time I faced him, he nearly murdered 5 million people. And that was an Amazing Spider-Man Annual 15. And then it's funny because we get this really awkward scene where he's swinging around and he's like, my spider sense is tingling like crazy. What could it be? I don't get it. Everything seems fine. Wait, that man. And he sees like this old man locking up the door to a jewelry store, Miller Jewelry. And so the guy sees him, gets scared, starts running away. So Spider-Man tries to confront him. And he's like, not so fast, chum. Let's you and me chat about a little matter of attempted robbery. And he's like, I own this shop. What gives you the right to harass innocent people? So once again, Parker luck strikes again, right? So that scene kind of goes nowhere, but whatever. Mm-hmm. It's funny, though. So then we cut over to this weird montage scene of Doc Ock robbing a whole bunch of different places. So he robs Stark International, Humboldt Nuclear Research Center, all of these different places, stealing this plutonium, I guess, at every one of these places, right?
Yeah, different electronics. And he's essentially building himself a new lab and this getting all the materials he needs for this experiment that he stole the plutonium for. Right.
So then Peter Parker goes into the work of the Daily Bugle and he's talking to J. Jonah Jameson. And that goes nowhere. Oh yeah, so then he runs into Joe Robertson, and Joe Robertson tells him that he's like, Brentwood Labs on Long Island is constructing a prototype nuclear reactor. Electronic components vital to that construction are due to arrive in New York by ship tomorrow night. Could be a story there. And Peter's like, hey, sounds good to me. So then he costumes up, goes there as Spider-Man, and sure enough, Doc Ock is there. This boat has come in and Doc Ock is attacking the boat. So they start fighting. They have their typical fist fight, fisticuffs for a few issues, back and forth. And then eventually Doc Ock releases this gas canister and he gets away. Spider-Man tries to follow him. But Doc Ock's gone. So then Doc Ock kind of collects himself and goes to his underground headquarters. Is this underground or is it in a...
It's underground.
Yeah, I love it. I just gotta say, one thing I love about superhero comics is how sewers always look so much cleaner in superhero comics, eh? You notice that? Because isn't this one in a sewer? I love that. It's like these... I've seen sewers in my neighborhood. They don't look anything like this,
Mm-mm.
But anyway... These
are also New York sewers, though.
That's true.
Right?
It might be a little bit bigger, but I don't know if I could imagine Pontiac Silverdome size rooms in a sewer underneath New York. But whatever. What do I know, right? So Doc Ock is reconvening, and then we basically get this little touching base with this rivalry between Peter Parker and is it Lance Bannon?
Yes.
Yeah, arguing back and forth, and then. Spider-Man is going to go on his way. He's looking for Doc Ock. His spider sense goes off when he's nearby at one of those manholes. So he jumps down, ends up in the sewer water, breaks into a wall, and sure enough, we got this gigantic underground base. And, once again, fighting. And fighting. And, it's kind of a typical scene, except there's a really cool part where Dr. Octopus gets knocked unconscious, but then his arms actually come to life, and they're crawling towards Spider-Man. And even though we can see that Dr. Octopus is completely unconscious and kind of just hanging there, the arms are still attacking Spider-Man, which I think is really cool. And then this doohickey that Doc Ock has created here, I don't even remember what happens with this, but it's counting down. Oh, it's going to destroy New York, right?
It's a nuclear reactor.
Yeah, and it's going to destroy New York, and Peter Parker knows that only Dr. Octopus can stop it, right? So he takes a bucket of cold water that just happens to be there and throws it on Dr. Octopus. Dr. Octopus wakes up, and he goes over to the nuclear reactor, and he like punches in whatever he has to, and ends up stopping the explosion. So basically, then they're arguing back and forth, and then Doc Ock, he's like, "Oh, I'm going to kill you, I'm going to kill you." He ends up smashing the ceiling. All the rubble comes crashing down on him. Spider-Man gets away. And that is the end of the fill-in story. And that's it. And
I just want to... Oh,
Becca,
sorry.
go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to point out, you when you said, like, when he goes to the jeweler, like, and he's like, "Oh, my spider sense is going off. This is weird." Later in the issue, he remembers that his spider sense went off at that place.
Okay.
And that's the manhole that... Because Doc Ock's lab is directly underneath.
Okay.
That's why his spider sense was going off.
Good call. All right, I missed that.
So he remembers. He's like, "Oh, shit."
Okay.
And then goes back.
I totally missed that. Josh, I hear you sighing there.
It was fun. It feels very retro. It feels like, like a 60s, 70s Spider-Man issue. It kind of feels like if you fed a robot a bunch of Spider-Man scripts and then asked the robot to make a story about Spider-Man, this is what it would spit out. Like, it's very... Doc Ock steals the plutonium to power himself up, and he hides in the sewer, and it's just like... It's fun. I enjoy reading it. I think it was just maybe a little bit dry at times.
Right.
Nothing really, like, spectacular happens.
Yeah.
I have to go.
Yeah.
I can't be here. Goodbye. Bye.
Becca's
Everybody,
out.
I'm out.
See ya.
I'm even...
I can read Spider-Man comics, but I draw the line at puns.
Okay.
No puns.
But yeah, it was fine. Like, I don't know. There wasn't really much that stood out to be like really great, but there wasn't a lot that was like, I can't read this anymore. It just felt pretty standard Spider-Man. Maybe the only things that did stick out was, like you had mentioned, Mike, when Doc Ock, the arms kind of come to life and he's like dangling there and the arms are continuing to fight. That's kind of an interesting, fun thing that doesn't happen too much in the comics. Like, I know that's something that was leaned on heavily in the Sam Raimi Spider-Man 2 movie, where it feels like his arms are a different character almost. But I enjoyed that part. But all in all, it was pretty standard, like, goofy, a little bit corny Spider-Man story.
I have to agree. I mean, compared to the issue of Web we read, this one is legitimately a fill-in. It is fun, but it's so borderline. Like, again, I can read any Spider-Man comic, so I enjoyed it, but if I were to recommend this to someone, I don't think I would, right? It's just...
Maybe for, like, a younger viewer that's interested in Spider-Man, or, it's nothing super special. Right.
Becca, anything else? Oh, go ahead.
It's such a dated filler issue too. Because normally if it's a filler issue, it's like, oh, Spider-Man went on a one-off adventure. But in this one, he's still in college and he's got his regular suit. So I'm just like, wow, cool. So none of this actually matters at all.
Yeah.
It's so like normally I can kind of tell when it's a filler issue, but this one it's like the title of it was, hey, we couldn't make a new comic this week. Here you go.
Yeah.
I do like Doc Ock in the issue. I'm always a big fan of Mr. Tentacle Hentai Boy,
Oh no.
There's a couple panels in here that are questionable. Like, whoever was drawing this was...
Greg LaRoque.
Really?
Oh,
where?
He was in. There's no page numbers, but I think it's their first fight on the boat when he's got like Peter's arms behind his back and he's very damsel in distress, like splayed. There's like all the gases everywhere.
Yeah, that's true. They are daintily wrapped around his thigh there.
It's very femininely.
His inner thigh.
Oh, that's kind of odd. Yeah, you're right. It's kind of
odd. It looks like maybe it was referenced from. So the artist was like, I gotta look up reference for like people like tied up in like ropes and stuff, and then was like, oh, maybe don't Google that. But not that Google existed, but like if it did, he'd Google man tied up in ropes reference, and that's what he would get and be like, well, that was what I was looking for. So, I love the arms. Whenever the arms are their own character, love that. That's so rad. The fact that they're like so self-preserving in that sense where it doesn't matter that Otto's completely unconscious, so they act on their own. And normally on behalf of Otto, like they don't like do things that he wouldn't want, right? So I don't know if they have like their own consciousness or if it's just like Otto's consciousness amplified. Like I know there's a difference between like how he gets his arms. A lot of times, like I think it's like it was an explosion, and then you have like the Raimi version where it's like he puts them on and there's a bunch of blue light. I don't know. I haven't watched the movie in a while,
right.
But and then I just like how wacky they are. Like sometimes they're really short, sometimes they're like super long. Yeah, it's just a wacky comic. It wasn't great. Maybe too much dialogue, like. But it had its moments. Like it wasn't like it was very like one shot after school special kind of thing. Like
right.
Like, oh, we need a bad guy. Doc Ock, he needs to be doing something. Stealing plutonium. Okay, Peter, stop him. Like, okay, that's fine. He's got the same outfit in this issue that he had in the casino in the issue of Web of, except instead of a white suit, it's a blue suit. So that's nice. I don't know if anyone else noticed that.
No, I didn't. No.
Didn't notice that actually.
When he's like at the Daily Bugle, he's just in the same exact outfit.
Oh yeah,
the popped collar, black shirt.
He is.
So that's fun. Huh. The art is decent.
Yeah.
There was some good work here, like some good like actually very detailed background work, like when on the machinery and in Doc Ock's like lair is very well done. It's a very small panel and it's still like detailed. It's not muddy. Anytime Peter's spider sense goes off, I love the little black spermies. That's like my favorite retro thing. I love that.
What'd you call them?
Don't worry about it. What would you call them?
Just squiggly lines.
Okay. Yeah.
Tadpoles.
Oh yeah, tadpoles.
There you go.
Yeah. And Spider-Man's head is definitely not an egg. Don't worry about it. Yeah, and even the fight scenes, like of course there's a fight scene, but it's like actually well drawn and it's dynamic and you could follow it pretty easily. I think there was one page where I had an issue with it, and I think it was honestly, where was it? It was the page with the arrows. Was that this issue?
Arrows.
Maybe that was a different issue.
Flipping through here.
There are like small moments where it feels like the inks aren't the best and they're not transferred over properly. Particularly like one that I noticed while reading was that same panel that Becca was talking about where Peter's like being wrapped up. Yeah. Doc Ock is just like missing a hand. It's just not there.
Whoops.
It's just not there. And he's like raising his fists up to the sky. Like it's like kind of important. It's not like in the background. His hand is just like not there. It's just not drawn. Like he looks like he just has like a stump there. Like it's like small things like that where I feel like maybe this issue wasn't completely finished at the time. Like around the time, right? Like it could have been like halfway done and they scrapped it, and then 5 years later, shit, we need an issue. Pull something out from the drawer, and they just pulled this thing out. And is it done? Yeah, pretty much. Just like let's just finish it up and get it out of here. So
Well, and just to point out, the fact that the inker on this issue is the same as the inker in one of the other issues means it was probably written and drawn, but not inked.
Right.
That's probably what happened.
Yeah. So.
Because I really like that panel where Spider-Man first is in Doc Ock's lair, and it's dark, and Doc Ock walks in and it's dark, and all the lights coming from he's backlit, and Spider-Man's all dark, and he turns the lights on. I really like that panel where he's coming down from the ceiling, classic Spider-Man. And then if you look at the couple panels after that, he's just looks like the Japanese Spider-Man suit from the show. It's just oof. We took a quality dive there.
Yeah.
But I mean, can't win them all.
So basically, kind of a formulaic fill-in, like Josh said, possibly written by robots. But it's still kind of fun, right?
Right. Yeah, it was pretty fun.
Who doesn't like a grown man walking around this sewer?
Exactly.
2 grown men.
Ooh. Double the fun.
Hello. Yeah, I thought it was pretty average. It's like the exact middle of a good and bad comic book, I think. It's like the bare minimum of what a comic book should be, both art and story wise. It's kind of what you picture in your head when you think of comics, or what really anybody I think would picture in their head when they think of comics.
Of a kind of a bad comic, right?
Not even because this wasn't bad.
No, well, I guess what I mean, a cheap.
It's not.
Yeah.
Particularly, it doesn't stand out to be an amazing form of art. It feels like this poppy, fun newsstand thing that you pay a quarter for and hand to your kids, and it's exactly kind of what you think of when you think of a Spider-Man cartoon TV episode too. It just kind of falls along the exact line of that stereotype of a superhero story. Right. So I think for that, it's kind of a mild recommendation where it's just it's good. It's definitely not a bad story, but it's not something I would go out of my way to hand people to show them what great things comics can be.
Right. Bex Luthor, what's your final word?
Yeah, it's just it's such an interesting juxtaposition between the last issue we read where I think the medium was used very well, and in this one it's just let's get a comic book out the door. Here is a comic book, Spider-Man is there, it's very just formulaic, basic, nothing is awful, but nothing is great. So, and it's Josh said, you'd pay a quarter for it and give it to your kids, but I would pay a quarter for it now, not so much in the time in the 80s.
Right, that'd be paying $5, right?
Very different quarter.
Yeah.
There's some charm to it. I mean, it's not awful, right? I'd say it's a solid 6 out of 10. I wouldn't give it a 5 because I did enjoy it and I did like some of the artwork in it. If you're looking for more bondage style stuff, you could read any other earlier Wonder Woman, and that'll give you way better rope tying than this ever could. But it's fine.
Yeah.
Doc Ock's pretty thick.
Yeah.
Whose idea was that?
I think he's always been kind of thick, but I'll agree.
C's.
This was not. In fact, I think I sold this issue when I was a kid. I didn't keep it, so it's obviously not a great issue. But it does fit in, especially with the time period it was meant for, which is 1979, 1980. So, if you're into that, it's fine. Nothing spectacular, but even a bad Spider-Man comic from this time is worth a good read, I think. So yeah, mild recommendation for me as well. So that's it. That wraps up this week's episode. 3 more Spidey comics that you could probably live without, but they all have their moments, right? That's what's important about.
I think for me, Amazing stood out this week as
Amazing.
Something I'm probably gonna think about when in another year's time when we're talking about our favorite comics from the year. This one's probably gonna stand out to me as being one of my favorites.
For me, the scenes with the Rose, definitely. You're right. They make that issue stand out. You're right. That will make it a classic in my mind. So overall, Becca, this week, what do you think?
Yeah, no, mine was the best one. You guys suck.
Woo!
No, when we're, like, on episode 200, when we're thinking back to, like, the big plot twists and events and the things that have happened in Spider-Man's life, it's like the reveal of who the Rose was is not going to be the flashiest, craziest, like, oh my god, can you believe it? But I think it'll probably be one of the most well-done ones because it's so soft and subtle and not so
over the top.
Yeah, like, it's just, it exists in the universe and works well in that universe.
Yeah.
So,
what are we gonna say, Josh?
I think this one stands out so much too because of the awful story that's been happening for the Hobgoblin reveal, where it's like it's not that the story itself is awful. It just feels like it doesn't really have a plan at this point. Like, it's so up and down, and then they reveal that it's Flash, and then guess what? It's not really Flash, and it's just like so back and forth, and it's like this big event, this huge thing that's happening. Like, of course, when they finally reveal, it's not going to be subtle like this. It's going to be finally what you've all been waiting for. Like, it's this main event. There's going to be a drum roll. The spotlight's going to go on Hobgoblin as he rips off his mask. It's going to be this like huge thing, and you're
gonna go, oh, who's that guy?
Who's that again?
I don't remember who that guy is. And you go. Be like, oh,
well,
hold on, I gotta do the quick Google, and then you'll do a quick Google and be like, oh,
imagine at the time too, like, not being able to just look up who this dude is.
Who's this
guy again? Yeah, I wasn't able to get every single issue. Who was this guy again?
Whereas, like, the reveal of the Rose being Wilson Fisk's son is kind of a big deal.
True. But go ahead, Becca.
I was just going to say, I very much appreciate the reveal. Wilson Fisk's son is the Rose, much more than I think most unmasking.
Right, I agree. It's a good issue. Yeah, it's a good reveal.
It's like they kind of, I'm not sure if they did, but maybe they knew who the Rose was when they created him. Maybe.
Oh, absolutely.
Or
probably.
Like, very soon after, when they were like, oh, let's create this guy, they're like, what if he was Wilson Fisk's son? Or maybe, they're like, maybe we should part of the Wilson Fisk's son. Like, it seems like they knew what they were doing. And in the Hobgoblin, it's like, oh, is it this guy? Is it this guy?
Right.
Well, you don't know, so how am I supposed to know?
So for next week's episode, we're gonna take kind of a left turn, and we're gonna go to doing some more. Do you guys remember how we did like giveaways and supplemental comics before?
With the sick ads.
We're gonna do some more again. So next week it's an all Spider-Man and Hulk episode. Okay, so we're gonna be doing Spider-Man and the Hulk supplement to Chicago Tribune. What price a life? Okay, and then we're gonna do Spider-Man and the Incredible Hulk in a back to school edition from Sanger Harris. Okay, in a story called Pipeline to Peril. Then we're going to do another one called Spider-Man and the Incredible Hulk in Battle Dr. Doom in the Colorado Caper.
It's going to be so bad.
Oh, that sounds great.
I can't wait.
It's going to be the Hulk Spider-Man fighting Dr. Doom in Colorado. I live in Colorado. Whoa.
So be sure to join us next week. Thank you, Bex Luthor, for joining us this episode, as always.
Yeah, thank you.
All the way from Colorado.
That's right. And Josh, you can take it from here.
Yeah, we also want to thank you guys so much for listening to the podcast. It really helps when you leave us a review over on Apple Podcasts, or you can drop us a line on Twitter at HCT Spidercast. Please let us know what you guys think about the comics we're reading and talking about, and the podcast itself. We definitely want to keep that comics conversation going.
That's right. So until next Monday, see you later.